NTB, Jussie Smollett is in a dangerous situation right now, and this may not end well. It very well may not end well. Let me tell you why. So Jussie Smollett is in some hot water, and he is definitely in a very dangerous situation right now. He is in a dangerous predicament because from the words of the judge, there appears to be a real hostility towards this man for what he's done. And the tongue lashing that the judge gave to him, it was so indicative of that disappointment, frustration, and even anger. He was torched at his sentencing. He was told he was basically a person who had thrown his life away and disrespected and removed all the goodwill that he had afforded, and his life was now in shambles. And it was hard to hear, but the judge felt that I guess he needed to hear how basically disgusted he was. And he sits as part, the judge that is, sits as part of the criminal justice system. And so, his words echo across the criminal justice system, because you have to remember that the criminal justice system is just that. It is a system, and they're all connected. And at the top of that system, or near the top, is the judiciary, and the voice of the judge carries a lot of weight. And he spoke about the work of the police and the troubles that Jussie caused the police department and the investigative teams. And it appears that Jussie has angered a lot of people. He ruffled a lot of feathers. And when you ruffle feathers within the entirety of the criminal justice system, or even in parts of the criminal justice system, oftentimes that vibration travels all the way through. And when I talk about the criminal justice system, that's what it is. It's just a group of agencies that kind of work together to bring about, I guess, justice, right? Some would argue with the notion of, does it do that? Does it really bring about justice? Was justice really done for or to Jussie when, he was a first offender? He was sentenced to 3 years probation, 150 days confinement, almost $200,000 in fines. He has to be careful because the tone has been set and the voice of the criminal justice system has been heard, that is the judge. And if those vibrations, as they often do, reverberate all through the criminal justice system, beyond the police, is going to trickle into corrections, because corrections is part of the criminal justice system. And now he is in the hands of another part of the criminal justice system, the Department of Corrections. And a big difference between the Department of Corrections, right, and other parts of the criminal justice system like the police or the judiciary, a lot of things they do is in the open. There's body cameras, right? There's courtroom reporters, there's stenographers. So a lot of things that they do is captured. And even still, we often see some, unfortunately, abuses right on camera. Abuses, even murders. Some go totally unpunished, even. The Department of Corrections is that part of the criminal justice system that's a dark hole because it's behind a wall, sometimes many walls, and it's isolated. There's not a lot of cameras, and a person can go in there and really catch bad decisions if people really have an axe to grind with you. And Jussie is feeling that right now because there's no body cameras now. No one knows what's happening to Jussie behind those dark walls of the prison right now. No one knows. And when he left court, it appears that he was potentially in an emotional state, not necessarily a place psychologically where he was gonna, have a psychological break, but he was moved. In court, it was obvious he was moved. And some of the things that he said were indicative of a fear. and possibly rightfully so, considering what has happened to others who have been found dead in the criminal justice system, Department of Corrections, or the jails. But something weird has happened. Let me not say weird. Something has happened because from the news reports, and that's all I'm going on, somehow they put a psych tag on his folder when he landed at the jail. Now, where did that psych tag come from? It could have come from the judge himself. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes the judge himself can put a note that there may be some psych issues with this individual. It could come from the jail itself. But whatever it is, remember I said that is a dark, secretive place in the bowels of the criminal justice system. No one really can see in there because there's no cameras, there's no body cams, there's no stenographers. And it gets worse when they move you to the psych unit. Is probably one of the most secretive places in the institution. And when you move to the psych unit in the jails, in most jails, you're not as afforded as many of the privileges that even the people in population get. And people in population who may have rubbed many people in the criminal justice system the wrong way can potentially get abused in a lot of different ways. There's so many ways they can abuse you if they have a bone to pick with you. Even if you're just in general population, they can mess with the time that you out your cell. They can sometimes forget to open your cell. You're supposed to be going to dinner and your cell doesn't open. You're supposed to be going to the shower and your cell doesn't open. They, just conveniently forget. They can transfer you from one unit to the next unit, from a known good unit where the violence is very low to horrible unit where the violence is very high. They can do so many things just to bother you, harass you, and even hurt you if need be. And quite often in the jails, what they'll do is, if they really have a bone to pick with you, showing you the dark sides of the jails. And I'm telling you what I know from many, many conversations with a lot of people and from personal experience. When they want to hurt you and they have a bone to pick with you, and they have you in that secluded, dark place where you're not really under a microscope of body cameras, etc. A lot of times what they'll try to do is move you to solitary confinement. They'll provoke you, get you to react, and then write you a disciplinary ticket and then move you to solitary confinement. Why? Because that's even less eyes on you, because now they can move you to a real deserted part of the prison or jail. And God knows what can happen there. And there's horrible stories, and I don't want to go into all the horrible stories of people just being found dead in solitary confinement. And, the same old story, he must have been depressed and, he ended itself. And then one of the darkest places that they can move a person if they really have a bone to pick with them, because your liberties, your freedoms, control over your body, which is already limited when you're in jail, it gets diminished even more when they move you to the psych ward. You see, because in the psych ward now, they're judging everything that you do, everything that you say. They're interviewing you, and if you're emotional, oh, you seem a little bit tense. You seem a little angry. Are you angry today, Mr. Smollet? Oh no, you seem really angry. Are you having any thoughts of hurting anyone, Mr. Smollet? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? No, don't get angry. I was just asking you the questions. This is just, I'm just doing my job. And a guy like Jusse Smollet, who's probably very green to how the game is played, if he's not careful, he can be provoked. If he's not careful, he can be antagonized and jostled into a reaction that can be labeled as, this man is psychologically in need of help. He's a little off. And then they'll start making these medical determinations. And there's a couple of things going on. I don't want to make this too long. I'm just trying to give you a little insight. A lot of the people who works in these jails and prisons, I'm not saying all of them, but they're not always the highest quality in terms of medical staff who you're going to find working in a jail or prison. These are not guys coming from often Harvard, Yale, the top law schools or the top med schools or the top schools of psychiatry. That's not who you're going to often find there. So the credentials and the qualifications of some of these people, also many of them, you'll find they systems people, meaning they go along and get along. How many of them are going to stand up if pressure comes down on them to we want to keep him here for observation. And there's a determination from the medical staff saying, well, maybe he doesn't need, can they withstand the pressure from the top, the bosses or the boss's bosses, or whispers that the boss's bosses want him there in that ward for whatever reason. And that'll play out in the next couple of days. Are you going to be willing to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to send this guy back to general population. This man is fine. There's nothing wrong with him. Do you have the cojones to do that if pressure comes down saying don't do that? And the last thing I'll say is, again, your liberties and freedoms there are so diminished already in jail, period, but definitely in the psych ward, in the psych unit. And they have so much control in terms of, they can restrain you, they can put hands on you, they can do body cavity searches if need be, strip searches if need be. It's very intrusive, abusive, and humiliating, particularly if nothing is really wrong with you, but people are saying something is wrong with you to justify doing things to you, or they're not really sure, but they're gonna do this just to make sure, just for your safety and the safety of the jail and the safety of everybody else in the jail and yada yada yada. So we're gonna give you this medication, and you resist the medication, now you potentially looking at assault charge. And this is where now it really gets deep, because you resist, that's more charges. So you went in there looking at 30 days. Now you got an assault charge because you were resisting being placed in a restraint chair, or you resisting a strip search or a cavity search, and now you got assault charges, sometimes multiple assault charges, because it's often 2 or 3 correction officers or correctional employees who's trying to hold you down, and sometimes 4 or 5 of them. And 2, 3 of them are hurt, 1 is injured, or, allegedly. You going right back to court with more charges. And, you want forced medication. And those forced medications, and if you ever seen some of the long-term consequences of those men and women in those jails and prisons who are on this so-called psych medication, it's not always a pretty sight what happens to them from when they first come in to the jail, prison, psych ward to when they leave. They leave a totally different person. Yeah, Jusse, if he has family, his family really needs to be vigilant here. If he has friends, they really need to be vigilant here. This can go bad real quick, real quick. So anyway, hopefully justice prevails and everything goes fine for that man, but it doesn't always work out that way in the criminal justice system.